to start out with, I have to give a little bit of a disclaimer here in that, as you probably picked up from my bio, most of my background is associated with the swine industry. So that's why I entitled this presentation, A Livestock Industry Perspective. I do, though, communicate very frequently with folks in the bovine community as well as poultry groups. And through our conversations, I think a lot of our concerns that I'll mention here apply to those groups as well, but I certainly don't speak for those groups per se. And it sounded like in listening to Dr. Clifford's talk earlier today that he reiterated some of the concerns that we have as well. So I think we're maybe not too far afield of reality there. Expectation versus reality. This is a picture of where I live in eastern North Carolina. And if you'll notice over there in the left-hand side of the picture, my partner in life and crime is also an equine veterinarian. And so we have to have the requisite equine things. We have to have the requisite 5 horses and somewhere for them to stay. So we built this, what she calls a horse barn. I call it a bank, because it seems to be that's where we dump all of our excess cash that we're not going to spend on anything else. But if you look to the right of that building, you'll see the armored vehicle that we use to move that cash around and show it off to other people who have similar armored vehicles loaded with cash that they don't know what else to do with. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not down on equine, so don't send me letters and emails and all of that. It's just this is what I live with on a daily basis. But that's not really why I brought this up. Why I brought this up was a few years ago I was at a meeting like this, and I called home to see how things were going, and Jan answered the phone all excited and said, congratulations, congratulations. And I thought, oh, my ship's come in, you know. The Publishers Clearinghouse is at the door, Jan's holding the big check, and everything's set. But the more I thought about that, the more unrealistic that seemed. If Publishers Clearinghouse really had shown up at my door and Jan had hold of the check, the chances of me ever talking to her again seemed extremely remote. So again, expectation and reality probably weren't going together. So I asked her, you know, what are you congratulating me for? And she said, well, we, and I want you to note that the use of the pronoun, we are now the proud owners of a stallion. And I think the shock of the Publishers Clearinghouse thing still had me. So as I thought about it, though, you know, maybe that's not such a bad thing from my perspective. I could now invite the guys to come over. We could sit on the front porch there, drink a few beers, and look at this massive, muscled stallion parading around the grounds. So maybe it wasn't all bad. So when I got home, she took me down to the barn to show me our new stallion. And she opens up the first stall on the right, and I look in there, and to my amazement, here's this 3-foot-tall, what she called miniature horse. And you've done it to me again. Where am I? I can't bring people over to see this. You know, that won't work. So what is this for? What are we going to? Well, this is our teaser stallion. And I'm like, I see the joke, but it looks to me more like it's the joke's on him. Really, that's the future of frustration right there. It seemed to me. So anyway, that just goes to show you that, again, expectation is not really reality. And I think that exemplifies some of our concerns within the ag industry relative to the One Health concept. We've heard a lot already about the formulation of the One Health concept. One of the stalwarts to this, in my mind, was a meeting by the Wildlife Conservation Society in 2004, where they actually laid out 12 guiding principles designed to prevent the spread of epidemic and epizootic diseases on a global basis. Now, the Wildlife Conservation Society is interested in this, obviously, from a wildlife perspective, but they work on a global basis, and they see the interaction of humans and animals as habitat goes away and we come more in contact with each other. But I think, particularly from the U.S. Perspective, AVMA has taken the lead on this, and you heard a lot about that from Dr. Marr earlier today. As he told you, they formed a task force to look at what is their vision relative to One Health. And that vision statement that came out of that was to promote and improve the health of humans, animals, and our environment, individually and collectively, by encouraging and ensuring the acceptance and adoption of One Health and its associated activities. But as we've heard already, the idea of One Health is nothing new to veterinarians and to livestock producers. We deal with it on a daily basis. As Dr. Marr showed you, the veterinarian's oath there, it's very prominent in that, the promotion of public health as part of that. And I think that's critical and integral to what veterinarians do. But it's also true for livestock producers as well. On a daily basis, we recognize the potential for disease transmission at that human-animal interface and the importance of such issues as food safety and zoonosis and the potential of diseases transferring not only from animals to humans but the other way as well. And consumer perception from a livestock producer standpoint is critical as well. So that human-animal interface is something that we're very comfortable with. That's where we work on a daily basis. The One Health concept, I think, is fairly prominent within animal health and animal agriculture. We hear that term fairly frequently. You hear it within AVMA. You've got a conference here that's the theme of this conference. The Port Board has addressed these issues, as has U.S. Animal Health Association and others. But I think it's a relatively new concept for public health, at least the aspect of incorporating the thought of animal issues into their daily activities, particularly when you get down to sort of the local levels. Historically, human health has been more disease treatment centered rather than prevention oriented per se. If you go on the website for the AMA or the American Public Health Association, it's pretty difficult to find the One Health concept in those websites. When you enter a search for One Health on those, predominantly what you get is more referencing to health care issues than it is to the concept of One World, One Health. At the 2009, I believe it was, APHA meeting, they did have an hour-and-a-half session within the veterinary public health group there talking about the concept of One Health. So it is starting to show up there. But I think generally there's overall a lack of understanding of animal issues, and particularly as relates to modern agriculture. And I think we've got a long way to go to get physicians on board with some type of concept like this. And this was, I don't know if you can read, probably can't read that, but this was a statement that came out of AVMA's One Health task force. And the statement was that success in adopting the One Health concept will require overcoming many other barriers, including difficulty in changing the mindset of healthcare providers from one of disease care to one of preventive medicine. The bias towards clinical care, increasing specialization and fragmentation of the field, as well as a general lack of awareness and education of physicians and difficulty in getting busy practitioners on board. So I think that's some of the challenges that we're going to face as we move forward with the One Health concept. So what are some of the potential benefits as we see it from an agriculture perspective? Certainly, number one, the integration of animal and human health infrastructure and policies is critical and has a lot of potential advantages for animal agriculture. These are a couple of pictures following the Hurricane Floyd in 1999 in North Carolina. And I can remember very clearly standing in a muddy field with piles of dead carcasses and 4 or 5 different agencies standing around arguing about what we could do with those carcasses. And so these are issues that could have been worked out ahead of time. And since then, certainly within North Carolina and a number of other states, we have had meetings to start planning on how do we deal with mass casualty events from an animal agriculture perspective. And I think what came to light there is that it's important that there are a lot of agencies out there that have a lot of involvement in these issues, and it's important to get all of those folks around the table and talk about this when you're coming up with plans. And those things, like I say, can be done ahead of time. In addition to that, as we've heard earlier, the human population is increasing dramatically, and particularly in developing countries. And as that human population increases, obviously the need for food increases in those areas as well. The problem that we encounter there is that those developing countries often have little infrastructure to deal with disease detection and disease control and management and those kinds of things. And so you have the potential to see the emergence of such things as SARS and Nipah and West Nile and influenza. According to an article in Nature magazine in February of 2008, there have been 335 emerging diseases in the human population since 1940. as we heard earlier, 75% of those emerging diseases in the last 30 years have been zoonotic in nature. So I think it's impossible for us to ignore that interaction between humans and animals. One of the things that's sort of near and dear to my heart and has been for a couple of years is the level of funding on a research basis in agriculture. You know, I deem this to be abysmal, actually. And I know you probably can't see it on this chart, but the USDA budget for research from 1976 to 1999 is the little brown line way down at the bottom, second one up from the light blue line. And if you could see that, you'd see that that amount really has not changed in the 30 years of this study that was put out by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. But contrasting that, look at the NIH budget, which is the blue line at the top. You see dramatic increases in trends for research over those 30 years during that same period of time. Just another way to look at that, if we talk just about basic research, which I think is critical to animal agriculture, because this is the type of research that doesn't have a high profit return, and it's long-term type of research. It's those things that private industry probably isn't going to be able to do, but it's the things that we base a lot of our future technology and advances on. So to me, this is a critical funding stream that we need to look at. And again, you see the same pattern. The USDA budget down at the bottom, very little change over the 30-year time frame, but yet when we look at public health issues, we see a dramatic increase in even basic level research. And one more chart to sort of show that from a different perspective. This looks at the different life sciences research budgets. And again, you'll have a hard time picking out the agriculture life science, which is actually shown in the black line with the little green dots that they call all other life sciences. If you could see that, you would see that in 1970, that budget was about $3 billion. In 2007, it was $5 billion. And it actually shown some decline since about 2002 from a high of somewhere around $6 billion. During that same time period, if you look at the NIH budget, which is the green line that's peaking up at the top, I think it makes the case that you see a pretty dramatic increase in federal funding for research, although I will say the NIH budget has suffered a bit over the last few years as well, which I don't think bodes well for us in animal agriculture if the public health budget, if they found a way to cut that as well. So that's my soapbox, and I'll get off of that a little bit. The grass is always greener, isn't it, on the other side of the fence? So there's always opportunities over there, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with striving to attain those advantages, but getting there is obviously fraught with a lot of challenges and barriers. So if it's possible to form a partnership that can fuel some access to those additional resources, I think that has a lot of potential benefit. But there's a downside as well. Not every partnership you form is mutually beneficial, and that's the concern, I think, from animal agriculture. And Dr. Clifford talked about this a little, although he didn't do the visuals. But and some of my colleagues actually said, well, when they found out I was going to give this talk, well, you could just throw that one slide up and ask if there's any questions, because that's sort of where some folks think they are, and I think we're a little better off than that, and I thought this talk was worth giving a little bit more in-depth analysis of that. So we'll talk a little bit about what some of the industry concerns are. You know, the ag industry obviously recognizes the potential benefits that could come about as One Health moves forward. But they're also concerned about the possible ramifications. And I think, as Dr. Clifford pointed out, most of those concerns actually arise from a lack of trust and very little previous interaction with some of our public health colleagues. And quite frankly, some of those interactions have not wound up to be very beneficial from an animal health standpoint. But I think a lot of this stems from a lack of communication, misinformation, adoption of what we would term to be the less than scientific principles, such as the precautionary principle and things like that. So if this is to move forward and be successful for both animal health and public health, there's a number of topics that I think need to be addressed. First and foremost is communications and building trust. Developing the One Health agriculture human leadership needs to be done without biased agendas. We need to open the educational opportunities to build ag and human understanding of what One Health is. Although it's talked about quite a bit more on the animal health side, I think, still there's a lot of producers and veterinarians that aren't comfortable with this concept, and that talked about that earlier. So I think there's a lot of education to be done there on both sides of the table. Outreach opportunities to enhance an understanding of the impact of this human and animal interface that we talk about. We need to raise the level of awareness among public health regarding disease prevention efforts and conventional animal agriculture. As I said earlier, there's a huge divide there, I think, between their understanding and perception of what animal agriculture is all about today and how it functions in modern agriculture. Again, it doesn't show up very frequently in the AMA or the APHA websites. But the AVMA did take on this task, and they labeled, as you heard earlier, One Health as a new professional imperative. But we need a further understanding as well of modern agriculture in order to dispel some of the common misconceptions. And it's my opinion that animal ag's been a whipping boy long enough. Again, we talked about funding and resource allocation. I think this is critical. John talked earlier about the efforts that we have had, that we, the swine industry, has had with USDA and CDC and pork producers and veterinarians on trying to develop a method by which we can survey the swine population for a number of diseases. First and foremost today is influenza. But we would like to capitalize on those dollars that are available from the public health side with their interest in influenza and utilize those dollars to develop a more comprehensive and integrated swine surveillance system that the industry could then use to analyze the herd for a variety of diseases, both endemic, epizootic, emergence of foreign animal diseases and whatnot, and obviously diseases of interest to public health as well. One of the challenges we had when the pandemic H1N1 arose was that we didn't even really know what variety of influenzas there were in the swine industry because there wasn't a concerted effort to actually survey the industry for that. So we do see a value in doing that, but there needs to be adequate funding and resources to carry that forward. Regarding funding and resource allocation, it's important that we establish research goals that meet the needs of both animal health and human health. That we provide animal agriculture access to these additional funding sources in order for us to be able to conduct needed animal health and production research. Again, the USDA's research levels, in my opinion, are woefully underfunded. We need to be able to analyze and communicate those research results, outcomes, and findings without bias. Furthermore, we need to define this partnership. We need to set a process forward to set the One Health direction and objectives. Again, I think communication is key here if this is going to move forward and be successful. It's important that we on animal agriculture understand where public health is coming from and vice versa. The objectives that we define have to emphasize issues that are relevant to both groups without slighting either one, and I have a personal bias towards animal health. But the pandemic H1N1 funding is an example of this. A large pot of money went to HHS to research H1N1, and animal health got a much smaller pot of that, and actually was somewhat beholden to HHS to get that funding based on our research efforts and how well did that match up with their research goals. Scientific method and results communication. I think it's important when we put all this money and effort into doing this research that we apply those same standards of rigor to agriculture and human scientific study, i.e. the precautionary principle versus the scientific process. And that at the end of the day, we sit down and do a common analysis of what the studies actually showed us, and we align together the interpretation of those results. And then it's important that we produce a joint communication of those results with particular sensitivity to the potential impact that expressing those results can, and the way you express those results can have to public perception, market access, and trade implications, which are obviously vitally important to animal agriculture. Just a couple of other miscellaneous things that we need to take a look at. Defining the effect that different ecosystems may have on the agriculture and human risks and One Health, I think is important as we talked earlier about how these things interact today. It's much different than it was 30 or 40 years ago. Investigating the role of ag and human nutrition in One Health risk, and looking at occupational health, both within the agriculture community and the human community, and how do those interact. So, just to wrap this up, you can have the best of intentions, you can have the best machine there is out there to do the job, but at the end of the day, it comes down to who's in control, and what is their goal, and what is their direction. And actually, this dog is sort of pertinent to the conversation that we're having. His name is Gus. He is being trained as a therapy dog in North Carolina, and will obviously, if things go as planned, interact very, very closely with his human counterparts. So I think he symbolizes very well what we think can be a positive that could come out of the One Health issue. So the ultimate question is One Health, One World, One Health just another expensive bridge to nowhere that it isn't even completed and falling down, or is it our gateway to the future? So thank you very much.